second day of the open-ended working group on benefit sharing from the use of DSI. And just to say good morning, it's a beautiful day, and hopefully we'll have a beautiful outcome of the session today. So let me allow, first of all, to thank you for the constructive and insightful and positive spirit that accompanied our work yesterday. It signals indeed your resolve and commitment to move forward and deliver on your mandate as a working group. And I hope that you were able to enjoy the reception yesterday evening and had a restful night, since we finished very quickly yesterday. And hopefully you also had fruitful discussions this morning in your regional groups following the non-paper that we issued. In this morning's session, we'll continue our deliberations as we indicated yesterday, and it will be based on agenda item 3 on the further development of the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of DSI, including a global fund. Yesterday we heard your reactions, your insights and reflections on document 2/2, and in particular the question of whether or not it provided a reasonable starting point for our negotiations. We were very grateful to hear your reflections, all of which were very helpful and constructive. You were able to point out the gaps and areas that need improvement, but as a rule, you also felt that it does provide a reasonable starting point. So like we promised yesterday, we integrated all of the comments that we had, and we produced a non-paper which was made available in English last night at 10:30, and in the other 5 languages this morning around 7:30. This non-paper consists of the elements for a draft recommendation from document 2/2, including enclosures A to F, along with some additional framing to ensure that it is presented as a draft COP decision. So let me just describe the paper in detail. Yesterday, we had a range of views on the options presented in paragraph 2 and paragraph 12, and asked that the paper better reflect the proposal from the African group for 1% levy on retail sales, specifically with reference to paragraph 2. We have therefore, in the revised paper, included an option C in paragraph 2, and we also have revised enclosure A to include a more detailed sector list, as was suggested by some of you yesterday, and also to reflect some of your suggestions that were made on other elements. You will see that in Annex E, we have identified the sector list as something which would be kept under review. We also heard that we needed a stronger and clearer focus on non-monetary benefit sharing, particularly with regards to narrowing the capacity gap with respect to the use of DSI. So we have included additional text in paragraph 3 and enclosure B on what we are trying to achieve through the sharing of non-monetary benefits. This text is lifted from the areas of potential convergence that were identified by the working group at its first meeting in Geneva. So this text is now not necessarily new to you, as you are the ones who previously negotiated it in the previous meeting. We also heard yesterday that you wanted a clearer set of instructions to databases and infrastructure providers on their obligations. So we have introduced a new paragraph 4 bis, which is drawn from the text in CBD Decision 15/9. In addition, we heard calls on the need to consider establishing a DSI standalone database under the CBD. And we have added text to enclosure B, paragraph 4G, because we feel this is a form of non-monetary benefit sharing. So that has been addressed in that enclosure B. We heard that we needed to acknowledge the importance of all voices, including communities beyond indigenous peoples, As such, we have added text referring to women and youth in the options under paragraph 12 as was requested yesterday. You also asked us to be clearer on how the governance of the mechanism, including the Global Fund, would operate. So we added paragraph 12 bis on transparency, inclusivity, and equity, which is also drawn from the text we agreed in Geneva. We added 14 ter, which is also drawn from the text we agreed in Geneva with reference to the issues of governance. We heard about the importance of effectively managing the interface with other processes from most of you, so we added paragraph 14 bis to address this issue. Finally, enclosure D is a terms of reference for the expert group established in option B in paragraph 12, which is also reflected in this non-paper. So as you remember, yesterday we mentioned that we'll be having contact groups today, and at 3:00 p.m. this afternoon, you will meet in contact group 1 to discuss paragraph 2, which is also has related enclosure, and that will also be discussed alongside the paragraph. And also there are some paragraphs that relate to paragraph 2 that will also be discussed in that contact group. So be ready that we have that coming up today at 3:00. At 19:30 p.m. this evening, you will meet in contact group 2 to discuss paragraph 12, its related enclosures, and some of the paragraphs that are also associated to paragraph 2. So this will be the focus of the discussion at 7:30 and 3 p.m. respectively today in the contact groups, like we had announced yesterday. During this session of the Committee of the Whole this morning, we would like to try and complete 2 discussions. The first discussion will be to discuss on the non-monetary benefit sharing component that we already mentioned. And if we have more time, which we hope we'll do, we want to be able to also start the discussion on governance of the multilateral mechanism. So that's the plan for today, and also how we have worked on this non-paper based on what we heard yesterday. And I hope that this is reflects what we heard yesterday and able to move us forward into the next stage of the discussion. With that, let's dive into our first topic today, non-monetary benefit sharing. As you can see now in front of you, you have a complete draft discussion for the COP. It touches on non-monetary benefit sharing in paragraph 3, and the associated enclosure for paragraph 3 is enclosure B. The text here is drawn from our discussions at COP15, like already indicated, in terms of providing more clarity on the paragraph 3, and also in Geneva last year, where we also had some views on what would encompass the issue of non-monetary benefit sharing. And also some of the information is taken from our intersessional period this year. So we see that based on this, very little will be new to you, because these are things that we have already been discussing in all of those sessions and forums, and that you'll be able to recognize parts of enclosure B, and mostly we expect that you are familiar with them. And some of them are also taken from the annex of the Nagoya Protocol. So this is why we have developed the enclosure B. With that, that's the focus for today, paragraph 3 and enclosure B this morning. And so I would like now to open the floor for a discussion on that material. And what we really want to hear from you with regards to paragraph 3 and enclosure B this morning is to hear if the material that is there provides sufficient coverage of the issue on non-monetary benefit sharing for a decision that we plan to undertake to operationalize the DSI mechanism. So that's number one. We want to be able to see if it's sufficient as it stands, or is there anything missing that we need to also include and consider when it comes to non-monetary benefit sharing? And are there elements or aspects of the text which you can support that we take them and move with them forward? And if so, why do you support those elements? We really want you to be solution-oriented as we are building this thing together, and we want to be able to find the solutions that can move us forward in terms of operationalizing the DSI mechanism. We've already had long sessions where we have explored all of these issues, like I indicated, at COP15 and during the intersessional period in Geneva. So we just want to provide further clarity today. And this is the time that we should be able to have concrete options that help us to move forward in our discussion and development of the mechanism further. So as a reminder, please keep your statements concise, speak slowly for our interpreters, and we should be able, all of us, to have a chance to follow interventions. I hope that is clear in terms of the approach this morning. So I'll now open the floor for interventions on paragraph 3 and enclosure B, reflecting on what is missing, how can we strengthen what is already available, and what solutions can be provided to make this a workable thing for the operationalization of the mechanism. So I'll pause and wait for you to take the floor on paragraph 3 and enclosure B. Thank you. I see we have parties that want to break the ice, so I give the floor to Egypt, followed by Zimbabwe. Egypt, you have the floor.
It's just I'm seeking clarification from your side. We have concrete text proposal for a 4-tier that covers entity managing public databases. And also we have a concrete text proposal for our submission yesterday on asking the Secretariat of the CBD to establish a database. Is that the right time to write down those text proposals? And what about the things that will not be covered here in that session because you are restricting us to a given paragraph and the group to a given paragraph? So what about the things that will be left out, how they will be dealt with? So I am seeking clarification on those 2 points. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Back to you with a response. I now give the floor to Zimbabwe.
Working in paragraph 3, can I request that we add knowledge sharing? So maybe between capacity building and development and technology transfer, it could read capacity building and development, knowledge sharing, technology transfer, and technical, and the text continues. Thank you.
Okay, Egypt, sorry, would you please come again? I think we might have missed maybe some of the points that you wanted to be addressed. We were able to get the first part, but the last part. So maybe just come again in terms of your issue to be addressed.
Yeah. We have certain text proposal in many of the para, but we are not clear when to raise them because, I mean, the process as it stands right now, we are opening just one para, but some things may be fitting into that topic or not, so it's not quite clear when exactly to put the text proposal.
Okay, thank you, Egypt. Basically, we will go through all the paragraphs in this document by the end of the week. For now, we just wanted to start our discussion on paragraph 3 and focus on that aspect of non-monetary benefit sharing. And like I indicated, if we have time today, we'll move to governance and also to the issues that you have raised. If it's not today, we'll still create time for it later in the week to be able to discuss. So we'll deal with all the paragraphs. And I think for today, I would urge parties that we focus on the issue of non-monetary benefit and see how far we can go, and then we'll move to the next paragraphs in our discussion. I hope that is okay for you, Egypt. Okay, floor to Egypt.
For the clarification, actually what we are proposing fits into non-monetary benefit sharing because we will be talking about databases which fit into that topic, and with that, may I propose the text to be included? It's going to be for TER.
Yeah, thank you, Egypt. If it's about non-monetary benefit, like you said, I think we'll be getting those comments, so you can go ahead.
Proposing here is a new bullet point about managing public database. It reads as follows. Entities managing public database on digital sequence information are strongly encouraged to verify that new sequences are obtained in compliance with the legal framework of the country of origin and have received authorization from the relevant authority for publication. And with regard to the database that we, in our intervention, asked for it to be created, this is the text as we would like it to be reflected. Request the Executive Secretary to take immediate steps to enhance the effectiveness of the clearinghouse mechanism by sub-bullet point, establishing a centralized database for digital sequence information under the CHM mechanism, sub-bullet point, ensuring that this DSI database facilitate transparent monitoring of access and utilization of DSI new sub-bullet point, supporting non-monetary benefit sharing through this database by enabling capacity building, technology transfer, and information sharing among all parties, particularly developing countries. Another new point, decides that the DSI database shall serve the following purposes. Sub-bullet point, provide a transparent mechanism for monitoring access to and utilization of DSI, ensuring that benefits derived from DSI are shared in a fair and equitable manner. Another sub-bullet point, support the capacity of all parties, especially developing countries, to engage with DSI by providing access to relevant data, training opportunities, and technology transfer. Facilitate the exchange of information on DSI, and its uses, enhancing collaboration and cooperation among parties. Am I moving too fast? Ensuring compliance with national and international regulations related to DSI, including the protection of traditional knowledge associated with DSI. Then, request the Executive Secretary to report on the progress of these actions at the next meeting of the Conference of the Party. Another one, encourage parties and other government and relevant organizations to actively participate in and support the development and utilization of the DSI database, contributing to the shared goal of the Convention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Those views, and I give the floor to India, followed by EU. India.
While the content of para 3 is laudable and it is what ideally should be done, my concern is basically how do we actually enforce this? What will be the mechanism of enforcing it? Because it is, the term subject to the individual circumstances, it's looks like more of an advisory rather than something which binds the users of DSI. So, just want to attract your kind attention to the modalities for enforcing this paragraph. How do we actually, what will be the trigger for the non-monetary benefit? Will it depend on the individual users to declare at their own will, or is there going to be some legislative framework for enforcing this? Thank you, Chair.
I'll now give the floor to EU, followed by Brazil. EU.
Thank you, Co-Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to have a further exchange on the non-paper with regard to the issue of non-monetary benefit sharing. I think that in the context of non-monetary benefit sharing, as it's been presented and discussed, we actually are looking at two separate considerations. The one is that the non-monetary benefits that are generated and shared by users of DSI from private and public sector, and how to value and distribute them. And in addition, what would be the potential for the multilateral mechanism and the DSI fund to support further generation of non-monetary benefits, such as developing and strengthening capacities of developing countries to access, use, and generate genetic sequences, enhance cooperation and technology transfer. So in principle, looking at paragraph 3, the EU and its member states do support your proposal that all users of DSI, regardless of the level of development of the country in which they are located, should share non-monetary benefit from the use of DSI. What we are uncomfortable with is the fact that this paragraph seems to stipulate that all such sharing should be through the multilateral mechanism. when you look at the reality of benefit sharing, right, non-monetary benefit sharing, this is done in a highly decentralized way. So we would actually question how that could be shared through the multilateral mechanism. And we currently don't see how that would work. We do like the way that the paragraph 3 actually includes some flexibility with regard to the forms and the ways of non-monetary benefit sharing, as it says that such non-monetary benefits may include those listed in enclosure B. I think that also we're not quite clear what the paragraph 3 actually intends to say in the second line when it says, for the purposes of. Because, I mean, what we are trying to say here is that users of DSI should share non-monetary benefits arising from the use of DSI in the form of. So I think that's really sort of what we're talking about. We have taken note of the longish list of Annex B. I think there are elements in there that are interesting, that there are elements in there that you have added which we find problematic. We are not quite ready to go into details, but I think this whole annex should be subject to further discussions. If you allow, I will also make a slight comment on the proposals made by the distinguished delegate of Egypt. We have taken careful note of his proposals, are not convinced that these proposals are in line with the principles and criteria of 15.9, since they seem to imply that databases should be used to monitor the way benefit sharing monitor the way use of DSI is taking place. And I'd like to recall that the decision 15.9 actually gets to the point that we are going in the direction of not having tracking and tracing, and that seems to be the intent of the Egyptian proposal. Secondly, we are not convinced of the added value of such a central database, especially if it's used to track and monitor access to and use of DSI, something that I think we have looked at in quite a different way up to now. But we're certainly sort of ready to hear more about the possible added values of such a central database. Pointing out from our perspective, we have a very well-functioning and operational system of global and national databases that is functional and operational, and would not be convinced at this point that there is a need to establish a central database under the auspices of the CBD Secretariat, regardless of the fact whether the Secretariat would have the capacity to operate such a central database or not. So those would be our comments for now.
For those comments, I'll now give the floor to Brazil, followed by Côte d'Ivoire.
Good morning, colleagues. One preliminary comment, taking upon the comment that your colleague co-chair made yesterday, because I think this is an important one. He mentioned the concerns that were raised yesterday by many parties concerning them relating to the imbalance that exists between the countries and the capacity to produce, generate, and the benefits out of DSI. And that those concerns are real and have been voiced in a very strong way. But what made me a bit concerned was that the relationship established between those concerns and the issue at hand, as if discussing non-monetary benefits would be a way to address those concerns. It is a way to address those concerns in part. It doesn't exhaust the full range of the concerns that were raised yesterday. Because if we are talking about correcting the imbalances that exist between developing and developed countries, there are a number of ways to address that, and non-monetary benefits is just one of them. I would just draw attention, for instance, to Article 20, Paragraph 20, to Paragraph 2 of the Convention that says, developed country parties shall provide new and additional financial resources to enable developing country parties to meet the agreed full incremental costs to them of implementing measures which fulfill the obligations of this convention. If you're going to develop a new multilateral mechanism, that means that there will be incremental costs to develop that mechanism, to implement that mechanism, and so on. And who will foot that bill? That's one example of concerns related to the imbalances that were mentioned yesterday that has nothing to do with non-monetary benefits of this discussion. Just to highlight that there are a number of, this discussion, of course, is useful, is important, but it does not exhaust a much wider discussion needed to address the correction of imbalances that exist. And we will need to devise correcting factors within the multilateral mechanisms to address several of those imbalances. And non-monetary benefits is just one of them. That's one preliminary comment. Now going to the non-paper, I'd like to highlight that non-monetary benefits are really very relevant, can be very relevant in bilateral arrangements. We have seen that in our national experience. If a business company has a bilateral arrangement with an indigenous people, for instance, they can negotiate based on the needs of a specific community capacity development activities. Now, it's very hard to conceive that being done within a multilateral framework, especially when private entities must collaborate with numerous institutions from all CBD contracting parties representing nearly every country in the world. Different countries, different indigenous peoples, different local communities are interested in receiving different benefits and may have a different interest in strategies for innovation and dissemination of technologies. So I think there are some technical serious technical challenges in providing for the sharing of benefits directly. That does not mean that those benefits cannot obtain indirectly by the multilateral mechanism. I think Brazil believes that the rule should be monetary, the sharing of monetary benefits. And the sharing of monetary benefits to the multilateral mechanism, in turn, the multilateral mechanism in itself, in turn, could be managed in such a way as to provide non-monetary support to countries or indigenous communities, especially in developing countries. But that is quite different from making direct sharing of non-monetary benefits. Now, if we look at paragraph 3, I think it's somewhat miswritten. Because what we think it's important to highlight is that all users of DSI, subject to their individual circumstances, should share benefits arising from the use of DSI through the multilateral mechanism. That's the most crucial, the most important part. The less important part is if these benefits will be monetary or non-monetary. As we said, we believe that the rule should be that the benefits should be monetary. Non-monetary benefit sharing should be complementary, should be made, if it is to be made by the multilateral mechanism, that means it should be made indirectly, not directly by the companies themselves, because it's very hard to envisage that actually working. So we wouldn't favor such a direct establishment, such a direct statement, saying that all users should share non-monetary benefits. I think all users should share benefits. If those benefits are monetary or non-monetary, it depends on the user, the context, and the situation that we can negotiate. Those would be just some preliminary comments. We will make further comments on more specific topics later on. Thank you.
For the comments, I will now give the floor to Côte d'Ivoire, followed by Jordan.
Mon intervention porte sur le point 3, comme vous l'aviez demandé. J'ai un souci avec le thème en fonction de leur situation personnelle. Et en y réfléchissant, je me suis demandé comment est-ce qu'on pourrait opérationnaliser cela. Et je me suis mise un peu dans le cadre de ce que nous faisons au niveau national. Quand un utilisateur vient et qu'on discute, que ce soit des avantages monétaires ou non monétaires, on leur demande de faire une planification, un chronogramme par rapport au partage des avantages. Mais le dire comme ça, j'ai l'impression qu'on donne la latitude à l'utilisateur de décider de quand il va le faire ou pas. Je ne sais pas si je me trompe. Est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas peut-être planifier? Quelqu'un l'a dit, dans le cadre bilatéral, c'est des choses sur lesquelles on convient et on sait à quel moment précisément ça doit pouvoir se faire. Mon deuxième intervention porte sur le B. Quand je regarde le point A, pour moi, le point A s'inscrit dans le point D, pour la simple raison que le besoin de capacité supplémentaire doit pouvoir se retrouver dans l'identification des besoins au niveau de chaque partie prenante. Donc, je ne sais pas pourquoi est-ce que les deux sont dedans. Peut-être que je me trompe. Et si je me trompe, j'ai besoin peut-être qu'on m'explique quelle est la différence entre le point A et le point B et le point D. Merci.
For the comments and also for reflecting on the enclosure B. I'll now give the floor to Jordan, followed by the UK. Jordan.
شكرا سيدة الرئيس مشارك. بما أنك حددت سيدة الرئيسة الحديث حول الفقرة الثالثة والضميمة باء، ربما كان لدينا العديد من الملاحظات حول الورقة غير الرسمية، ولكن سألتزم بالتوجيه حفاظا على الوقت. ففيما يتعلق في المنافع غير النقدية وآلية العمل عليها في الآلية متعددة الأطراف، نجد أنها تحتاج إلى النظر في عملية واضحة للتنفيذ وتدعم الاحتياجات التقنية للأطراف وتبادل المعارف والتكنولوجيا، وأن تتيح النهج التشاركي ما بين جميع الأطراف والقطاع الخاص. وفيما يتعلق في بناء القدرات، أجد أن تكون متناغمة ومنسجمة مع القرار 15/8، وهذا الذي يجب أن ينعكس ضمن الضميمة باء، والتي تكون محددة وموجهة لتحقيق أهداف الاتفاقية وإطار كوميك مونتريال والإيفاء بالالتزامات، بحيث تساهم تلك المنافع غير النقدية في تحقيق المنفعة الاقتصادية للبلدان لتكون أكثر قدرة على الاعتماد على الذات. شكرا سيدة الرئيس.
And also thank you for your understanding. Like indicated, we'll have a chance to go through the whole document. We are just building pieces and bits to bring it together. So thank you very much. I'll now give the floor to UK, followed by Switzerland.
Thank you for the paper and your quick work overnight. On paragraph 3, I mean, I think we had some similar reflections to the EU, and I think we also find it a little bit too prescriptive, where even if we take out for the purposes of, it's very specific, the non-monetary benefit sharing in relation to the supporting the generation, use and storage of DSI on genetic resources. So I wonder if to kind of remove that specificity, we could include the word including to broaden out and recognise that actually non-monetary benefit sharing could be used in ways which is beyond supporting the generation, use and storage of DSI on genetic resources. And on enclosure B, again, thank you for building that out, which does include some helpful additions. But we do see that there's a lot of repetition and duplication across the 4 paragraphs, and I think they could be quite significantly streamlined. Many of the same issues are mentioned several times across those. And on paragraph 4, specifically of the enclosure, yes, you're right, and thank you for highlighting that this paragraph was taken from the outcome of Working Group 1. But I do believe that was in the section where there was a need for further discussion, and certainly from that list there are elements there that we would not be able to support, even if it was from that paper. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, UK, and also for pointing out the duplications that can be improved, which was also mentioned by Cote d'Ivoire, I think. We have taken note of that. Now I give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Togo, then Japan. Switzerland.
So I would also like to share a few thoughts on paragraph 3 and the enclosure. So first of all, of course, the non-monetary benefit sharing is a very important element also in the multilateral mechanism. But as a general comment in the first line, the wording should be amended that we don't talk about any legal obligation, so it should be shared, but rather wording along the lines that all users of DSI are encouraged to share non-monetary benefits. And then also, we think it's difficult to see exactly how all these non-monetary benefits should be shared through the multilateral mechanism, and we should really also acknowledge ongoing non-monetary benefit sharing and further promote this. And therefore, we think that it's important to also mention that these non-monetary benefits could be shared through any existing multilateral mechanism or platform, such as the ABS clearinghouse, for example, but also such as open access public databases. And in this regard, I think it's also important to recall that also the open access to DSI and the availability of DSI is actually a major non-monetary benefit and should be also mentioned in this paragraph. And then in this context, we also see it more the new addition regarding capacity building, etc., to support the generation, use, and storage of DSI. So this would be not the main purpose of non-monetary benefit sharing, but rather in combination with the open access to DSI in public databases, where, of course, capacity building is an important element. But the overall objective of non-monetary benefit sharing should, of course, also be for the purpose of the sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity. Then we also think that we should not be too prescriptive on what we want to see as non-monetary benefit sharing. And so regarding the enclosure, we also have several questions on these lists of examples. And furthermore, also the new additions in the enclosure regarding potential criteria for non-monetary benefit sharing and the high-level goals, for example. For us, this is not really clear if this is needed and whether this would be useful, because finally what we think is much more important than having such criteria is to incentivize and further promote the sharing of non-monetary benefits. And so maybe we could think more about this, how this could be valued and recognized in an appropriate way. And finally, I also quickly wanted to react to the proposal from Egypt regarding a centralized DSI database, which we think might be problematic, because this goes a lot into direction of tracking and tracing of the use of specific DSI, which we already agreed that this is not practical, and this would not be in line with what we agreed in the criteria of paragraph 9 and 10 of decision 59 and the whole decision at the last COP. So we do not see this as a way forward to create a new central database. In particular, also because we have a very well-functioning system of DSI databases already in place, and so, yeah, we do not support this. Thank you very much.
I'll give the floor to Togo, followed by Japan, then Australia.
Merci, Madame la coprésidente. C'est la première fois que le Togo prend la parole. Permettez-moi de remercier l'hospitalité du gouvernement du Canada qui a accueilli cette réunion et de féliciter le secrétariat pour la parfaite organisation de cette réunion. Et Madame la Présidente, on a une idée de ce que peuvent être les avantages non monétaires liés à l'utilisation de l'ICN, tels que énumérés au point 4 de la pièce B. Cependant, le Togo estime que ces avantages sont énumérés sans préciser les secteurs auxquels ils peuvent être éventuellement reliés, tel que ça a été vu au niveau des avantages monétaires, ce qui pose, selon nous, un problème de suivi pour s'assurer de l'effectivité du partage de ces avantages non monétaires. La seconde préoccupation du Togo est de savoir donc s'il y a possibilité d'avoir des déclencheurs de partage des avantages non monétaires, de telle sorte que l'on soit rassuré, tel que le relevait la Côte d'Ivoire, du moment auquel ces avantages peuvent être effectivement partagés sur la chaîne de valeur et de leur production ou utilisation, évidemment en lien avec les principaux secteurs. Cet aspect mérite, Madame la Présidente, d'être clarifié afin de ne pas seulement avoir une liste exhaustive des avantages non monétaires tels que énumérés dans le point 4 de la pièce B, mais qui, dans la pratique, seront difficilement applicables ou seront même irréalistes. Ce qui revient donc comme proposition du Togo à se concentrer sur les avantages non monétaires réellement effectifs et peut-être en se basant sur l'expérience de ces avantages qui sont une synthèse de ces avantages-là, dont on a une idée exacte qu'ils existent et qu'ils peuvent être relevés comme pouvant être maintenus dans le mécanisme multilatéral. Merci, Madame la coprésidente.
Thank you, Togo, for your contribution. I'll give the floor to Japan, followed by Australia, then Colombia.
Thank you very much for coming up with this non-paper, which is quite helpful. We have some comment for paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 starts, all users of DSI subject to their individual circumstances. The word subject to is usually used for international treaties, so we propose this to be replaced with in line with, not subject to. And the word should, as pointed out by Switzerland, also to be replaced with encouraged to share. That is my comment on paragraph 3. And enclosure B has a list of non-monetary benefits. I know it is coming from our previous meeting in Geneva, but there are some inconsistencies. For example, item C, making the product available in the public domain. We are not quite clear what this product means. It is a bit vague. And item D, the licensing of products free of charge, it costs a lot. Licensing has monetary value, so should not be listed as a non-monetary benefit. Item F, the free distribution of products in social interest programs. We are not quite clear what this social interest program stands for. Item G, the establishment of national global databases, it actually costs a lot, and it could affect open access to data. So we are not quite sure about this item. Then item I, joint venture, actually this is included as the example of monetary benefit in the Nagoya Protocol. So this is quite not appropriate to include joint ventures here in this list. Item L, the joint ownership of relevant intellectual property rights. This has monetary value, so we think this should not be listed as non-monetary benefits. So this list should be streamlined, and we need further discussion on this. We think non-monetary benefit is something to be provided when the requirements of those who need and those who provide matches. So this is not something to be enforced under the multilateral mechanism. And finally, the proposal by the Egypt, it is not in line with the decision 15/9 we have agreed in previous COP, so we do not support this idea of centralized database. Thank you.
And also for commenting on the enclosure. I'll give the floor to Australia, Colombia, then Norway. Australia.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and g'day everyone. Really is a beautiful day outside. We've listened to everything that others have said, and look, we agree with the need to actually include non-monetary benefits as an individual component because it's almost a way of encouraging private organisations and companies to engage in additional ways to provide benefits, which we see happen every single day already. And we don't want to remove the company's ability to actually, share that information and do the uploading and share the results, in particular, of specific research papers that will lead to the better conservation of our species across the world. So I agree with the EU that the multilateral mechanism isn't the only way to share these non-monetary benefits. And so we need to think about how we do that to not discourage what's already going on, but to almost use this paragraph as a means for companies and organisations to have a licence to increase their non-monetary benefits where they wouldn't normally or wouldn't have thought about it otherwise. I think the only thing I would say is, in terms of the language, is that it will be really important throughout the document to remember that, as per decision 15.9 in paragraph 16, is that this is about DSI related to genetic resources. And so we need to keep that language, because if we just say all DSI, is that what we're really doing? Are we creating a completely DSI across the board mechanism, or are we doing a mechanism for the CBD? And I think that's a really important distinction. I agree with the language proposals by Japan and Switzerland, which I think will clarify it, and the UK's proposal of including means that the list isn't exhaustive, and we know that's important not to have a comprehensive list in these decisions so that we can look to other methods and innovative ways in the future. And agree with the Egypt proposal. That's certainly going down a tracking, trace, monitoring path, which we think is probably not quite in line with the 15.9 decision, but we're happy to sort of explore that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. I give the floor now to Colombia, followed by Norway.
Muchas gracias, señora copresidenta. Desde Colombia quisiéramos subrayar que, pues como está en la decisión 15.9, el uso de la información de secuencias digitales sobre recursos genéticos debe ser compartido equitativamente. Y tenemos un comentario específicamente en el enclosure B, en el numeral H, donde dice Promoting Joint Research Partnerships. Quisiéramos agregar incluyendo including community participatory and intercultural based research. Gracias.
Thank you, Colombia. I give the floor now to Norway, followed by Canada.
Some comments regarding non-monetary benefit sharing. So from the outset, Norway think we should focus on a bilateral approach of non-monetary benefit sharing, because that's how it works today. We do not foresee a trigger on the sharing of non-monetary benefit sharing, as noted by India, EU, Brazil, and others. Jordan mentioned decision 15/8 from COP15, Montreal. which also is about non-monetary benefit sharing in the sense of capacity building. And we shouldn't operate in a vacuum here. But maybe information can be shared by parties on a voluntary basis on the clearinghouse. So maybe there's merit in looking at sort of a link to the clearinghouse for parties to share information that regards capacity building on DSI. But we don't foresee a trigger. We think that would compromise the integrity of the multilateral mechanism. It would also be complicated. Now, regarding Egypt's proposal, we do not believe in building new separate databases under the CBD. We think we should use the existing public infrastructure. And we do also think that such carve-out or setting up of a new database will increase fragmentation. We think that what we do need is open access, but to use the existing public data infrastructure, but we have to fix what is not working, and that's the benefit sharing aspect. Thank you.
You know, now we'll move to Canada, followed by Syrian Arab Republic. Canada.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I'd like to echo the concerns expressed by a number of colleagues so far, delegates from the EU overall, the UK regarding the prescriptiveness and the need to add including to paragraph 3. And we also agree with Switzerland's proposal of adding are encouraged to share. We see this as a non-binding mechanism under a COP decision, and it's just critical that there's flexibility and non-prescriptiveness in non-monetary benefit sharing. Non-monetary benefit sharing is critical, but we can't be prescriptive. It needs to come from the users who are in a position to share those benefits, and that depends on who they are and what they do. It involves what size they are, how many they are in a group, what resources they actually have to share and are in a position to be able to share, and what also their national circumstances and regulations are that they're operating under. So we don't see how these things can be achieved directly via the multilateral mechanism rather than bilaterally, as Norway has just been saying. So we do agree with that. And we agree with Switzerland that it's very important to think about how to incentivize non-monetary benefit sharing and that need to flag the opportunity. I think, as Australia just said, that this is something companies can do. A lot of companies are already doing this. How can we make it more visible and encourage more of it to happen? We agree with each of the questions that Japan has just posed on certain elements that are in that list in Enclosure B. In our recall, we don't remember those components actually being negotiated. We saw them being proposed and then added to the list for further discussion, but never really having a negotiation around those things. So the points Japan made are very important to us. The list needs to be clearly indicative, and certainly with some components, mutually agreed terms are critical. Canada is not in a position to support even the suggestion of technology transfer unless nuanced by on mutually agreed terms, as we're not in a position to expropriate from rights holders. On the new database proposal from Egypt, we really consider that this goes against the 15/9 idea of cost effectiveness. We share those concerns expressed by the EU. We consider the cost would be astronomical, and we also should not underestimate the capacity that's needed to manage these databases already, and the exponential increase in the volume of data that are being generated, including through things like eDNA. And we, given the capacity needs there, we also don't see how any database could do the policing that's being requested. But we also note that there is evolution in how the existing public databases are addressing various issues of concern that we raise in these fora. So let's work with what we have. It's not a fixed situation. We can help to improve those institutions. Thank you.
Canada, I'll give the floor to Syrian Arab Republic, and also I'll hand over to my co-chair as I synthesize the very good constructive points that have already been given. Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة. بما أنه ببلدي أخذ الكلمة لأول مرة، اسمحوا لي أن أتقدم بالشكر للدولة المضيفة على حسن الاستقبال والضيافة. والشكر موصول للسكرتارية على جهودها لإعداد الوثائق، وأيضا أتقدم بالشكر على إعداد الورقة غير الرسمية. بالإشارة إلى الضميمة باء، إن موضوع المنفعة غير النقدية هو موضوع واسع ومتعدد الأوجه، ولذلك إن وضع معايير لتقاسم المنافع غير النقدية وتحديدها في نقاط عامة لن يفي بالغرض، لأنه يتوجب أن تكون هناك مؤشرات ذات قيمة محددة تبين مدى إمكانية تقاسم المنافع غير النقدية. وتشير النقطة باء في الضميمة باء إلى موضوع فجوة القدرات، والتي هي كبيرة جدا ما بين الدول النامية والدول المتقدمة، الأمر الذي يدعو إلى النظر بشكل دقيق لتطبيق هذه المعايير في موضوع المنافع غير النقدية. وإننا ندعم ما جاء به مندوب مصر، بحيث يكون هنالك قاعدة بيانات مركزية تنظم وتضبط عملية الوصول والاستخدام على غرار ما تم في غرفة تبادل معلومات السلامة الأحيائية وغرفة تبادل معلومات المصادر الوراثية، وألا يكون هناك قواعد بيانات متناثرة لمعلومات التسلسل الرقمي، بحيث يصعب موضوع التنظيم والمراقبة، وخاصة بالنسبة للأطراف ذات المنشأ للموارد الجينية ولمعلومات التسلسل الرقمي. وشكرا سيدتي الرئيس المشارك.
Thank you very much indeed, Syrian Arab Republic. That's very helpful. I'm reliably assured it's a lovely day outside, but maybe we'll all see it later. So next, I'll bring in, please, Kenya, and then the Republic of Korea. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Kenya believes in the value chain of digital sequence and product development. We have immense opportunity for non-monetary benefits. So I think that is something we need to consider, whether it is a hybrid system or under multilateral mechanism, because there is immense opportunity for non-monetary benefits from the data we have. Then this other aspect, in line with a proposal by Egypt, I know most of us are referring to the CP decision 15/9. When you read the whole, we need to read the whole of it, not separate. So part of it, as you go to issues for further consideration, you will see the last talking about principle of data governance. And that is a key trigger to benefit sharing. It does not mean traceability, because all of us, we are talking more of tracking and traceability. And here, Egypt is talking about, and most, how do we address aspect of the principle of data governance. That is a key point that will really trigger and aspect of benefit sharing. Thank you very much.
Indeed, Kenya, that's very helpful. I'll bring in Korea and a couple of other parties. I know that some colleagues from our IPLC and stakeholder groups have also been requesting the floor. So there's a couple more parties who haven't spoken. When I get to parties who are requesting to retake the floor, I'll bring in colleagues from the back of the room. So let me hear from the Republic of Korea and then Uganda.
Thank you for your hard work, co-chairs. We all know that this is not an easy task. We are concerned that requiring all DSI users to share non-monetary benefits arising from the use of DSI may be challenging. If non-monetary benefit sharing is to be made mandatory, the criteria for compliance would be difficult to establish. Additionally, non-commercial users are also considered DSI users. Supporting the opinions of Switzerland and Canada, and given these considerations, we consider it is appropriate. All users of DSI are encouraged to share non-monetary benefits arising from the use of DSI.
Thank you very much, Korea. Next from Uganda and then the United Arab Emirates. Uganda.
Yeah, I would first start by thanking the co-chairs for coming up with this non-paper. And with reference to Para 3, we want to note that incorporating non-monetary benefits sharing in the proposed framework is a commendable effort to recognize contributions that transcend financial transactions. Now, the proposal by Egypt, which we strongly support, provides a mechanism for non-monetary benefit sharing that ensures that these benefits, especially for IPLCs, are recognized and fairly compensated. We know that the public databases that are available at the moment have their advantages, such as broad accessibility and wide contribution from the scientific communities, but a CBD database can address specific issues, including the needs for a structured, compliant, and ethical management of DSI. So we think that having a system through which benefits are fairly and equitably documented and shared is a plus for us. So as mentioned by Kenya and Jordan and Egypt, I think this is something that we do not need to dismiss at the first instance before examining it to the full extent to see how it will work. I think it could be something that we need to discuss a little bit more further. As a party, we strongly support the creation of a CBD DSI database. Thank you, Chair.
Uganda. Next, we have the United Arab Emirates, and then I'll bring in IPLC's 1165. So, United Arab Emirates.
شكرا سيد الرئيس المشارك. بداية نود أن نعرب عن تقديرنا للجهود الكبيرة التي بذلت في إعداد هذه الورقة غير الرسمية في وقت قياسي. بعد مراجعة ما ورد في الورقة غير الرسمية، لدينا بعض الملاحظات في الجزئية المعروضة للمناقشة هذا الصباح، وخاصة فيما يتعلق بتنويع المنافع غير النقدية في الضميمة باء. الخيارات المدرجة في النقطة الرابعة مثل نقل التكنولوجيا وتعزيز الشراكات البحثية المشتركة تقدم مجموعة متنوعة من الفوائد التي يمكن أن تدعم التنمية المستدامة وتعزز الابتكار. ومع ذلك نرى أن بعض الخيارات المطروحة مثل إتاحة المنتج في المجال العام وترخيص المنتجات بالمجان والملكية المشتركة لحقوق الملكية الفكرية ذات الصلة قد تعتبر فوائد نقدية بطبيعتها، وهو ما قد يستدعي إعادة النظر في تصنيفها كفوائد غير نقدية، كما أن بعض هذه الخيارات تحتاج إلى مزيد من التوضيح فيما يتعلق بالتأثيرات المحتملة على الابتكار والاقتصاد، لضمان عدم تقويض الحوافز التجارية والابتكارية، والتي تعتبر أساسية لدفع عجلة البحث والتطوير. كما أننا نتساءل حول كيفية ضمان أن هذه الخيارات تحقق بالفعل الأهداف المرجوة دون أن تفرض أعباء غير متناسبة على الشركات والمبتكرين، خاصة في الدول النامية. ختاما، نحن نرى أن هذه النقاط تستحق المزيد من النقاش لضمان أن تكون الآلية المتعددة الأطراف فعالة في تحقيق الأهداف المشتركة وتضمن العدالة والإنصاف للجميع. شكرا.
Thank you very much, United Arab Emirates. So I will take the list now. It's a sort of a mixed list. I'm sure you'll indulge me. So IPLCs 1165, followed by Egypt. IPLCs.
Good morning, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the IIFB. We have a few points we'd like to raise. Firstly, and most crucially, we'd like to see a review of point C within paragraph of enclosure B of the non-paper. Firstly, while the sharing of products can be an important part of benefit sharing, the meaning of the placement of a product into the public domain is unclear to us. We believe that the placing of patents and intellectual property into the public domain could be considered an important form of benefit sharing. However, for Indigenous people as well as local communities, any traditional knowledge potentially contained within these products should never enter the public domain without their free, prior and informed consent, if at all. The IAFB would like to draw attention to the wording surrounding the placement of products into the public domain as part of non-monetary benefit sharing. The wording on this is not quite clear. Prioritisation is also needed for the benefit sharing options. Not all forms of benefit sharing are equitable in their outcomes. Prioritising the self-identified needs of Indigenous people, local communities and their women and youth as the stewards of biodiversity is the most effective way to meet the goals of the Convention. We also feel that the requirement for non-profit users to always share non-monetary benefits will not always lead to the most effective outcomes. Benefit sharing is required for all users. However, in cases where it would be administratively burdensome and lead to poorly defined outcomes, and only in situations where giving non-monetary benefits is not practical or feasible, the option to offer either monetary or non-monetary benefits may lead to better outcomes for non-profit users and recipients of benefits. In regards to point J of paragraph C of enclosure B, the sharing of research and development results, while important, should not necessarily be considered a non-monetary benefit, as this is a natural outcome from research and relationships. Lastly, we support paragraph 3 and the inclusion of 4 bis, but would also like to see the text broadened to support the inclusion of biocultural metadata or labelling. Thank you.
In IFB, I'll now bring in Egypt. You have the.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just to highlight some elements of our proposal. First thing is that what we are proposing here is mainly making the clearinghouses that already exist more functional. Under the Biosafety Clearinghouse of the Cartagena Protocol, the Secretariat has already a database on sequences. And it has, like, if I remember well, 861 records on the genetic element that has been inserted into GMOs. GMOs are product of DSI, actually. From my understanding, the construct of the database of the CBD is that you have a single pool of data and you have the websites that extract those information to be reflected on which clearinghouses that exist. I'm sure that with a little bit of working on IT issue, we can work on the database of sequence and improve it so that it reflects our need. We are not creating something new, but rather working on something and improving it. And we were quite careful about how to craft the language. We are improving the already existing clearinghouses, CHM, and mechanism under the CBD. we think by making them more functional, we will be able to share more information, more capacity building. It's one modality of sharing non-monetary benefit sharing, having it channeled. A lot of non-monetary benefit sharing is already generated, but nobody knows it exists. It has to be channeled through somewhere, and this is where the clearinghouses serve. You go there, you know what kind of capacity building are there, what is the report that has been produced, what are the scientific papers that has been produced. It's not for tracking, but for voluntarily reporting back. So if I access such information from database and I'm willing to report, okay, I have used that and I added this little bit of piece of science, I am sharing a small bit of summary for the papers that I publish. I'm sharing the sort of capacity building that I'm doing. It's why we created the mechanism for. The paper is well crafted, but it doesn't have any modality on how we are going to be share non-monetary benefit sharing. If it's on bilateral approach, nobody will know about it. A single report, a summary of a publication that has been done, even adding more annotation to a database is an added value. It's a sort of sharing non-monetary benefit sharing, but nobody knows they exist. That's why we have the clearinghouses. We need to make it more functional, more effective, so that we channel those information. You know where to look for. It's not really for tracking, but to share technology transfer for capacity building for. This is why we created the clearinghouses for. And that's why we have mandate to share information on the clearinghouses. Doing it bilaterally wouldn't serve. I wouldn't know that two countries have done this. Even when you access information, those databases that already exist, they will not allow you to share the things that you have done with the information. I mean, we didn't saw that it can be used for tracking, but it's not the purpose. It's for sharing data. I mean, coming from the scientific background, all the annotations that is added to the database are quite helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Egypt, for that further clarification. I'm sure there'll be reactions to that. I'm going to bring in South Africa, followed by Argentina. South Africa, you have the floor.
South Africa acknowledges the difficulty to implement the sharing of non-monetary benefits. South Africa proposes the following solution, that perhaps monetary benefits could be ring-fenced to implement non-monetary benefits, non-monetary benefit sharing, and respond to the suggestions listed in Enclosure B. We can explore further modalities on how to implement how we will run the programs that will be developed through the ring-fenced funding. But we believe that non-monetary benefit sharing should be a feature under the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism. We can build a program to give the opportunity for tech transfer and knowledge transfer and building the capacity to generate and store, utilize digital sequence information. There could be a regular program that then allows different countries to participate in, developing their skills and capacity on DSI. And so that's my proposal. Thank you.
South Africa, I encourage people to reflect on a new idea. It's a very interesting one. Let me bring in Argentina and then NGO 1144. Argentina.
Co-chair. Argentina agrees with the intervention previously made by Brazil in the matter of imbalances between developed and developing countries. Argentina referred yesterday to the overarching nature of the differences between developed and developing countries. And at this stage, we do not see that adequately reflected in the proposal. We agree that non-monetary benefits is one of the aspects where we can address the North-South divide, but it is not the only element. Having said that, we highlight that the inclusion of a well-designed section for non-monetary benefit sharing is of the utmost importance to bridge the gap between developed and developing countries on the access and use of TSI. We support most of the ideas shared by the developing countries, but in particular, we would like to suggest that the proposal for non-monetary benefit sharing gives a relevant role to the countries in identifying their needs. In that regard, Argentina suggests to consider a mechanism to publish the needs of countries, their research institutions, and other relevant stakeholders to access and use DSI. That could be in terms of capacity building, technology transfer, cooperation, partnerships, and other self-identified specific needs, so that users can offer to share benefits through meeting those needs. Regarding the comment made by some parties that technology transfer references can only be referred to under the criteria of mutually agreed terms, we have a different view. Technology transfer should be made under the terms specified in Article 16 of the Convention, meaning under fair and most favorable terms, including on concessional and preferential terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argentina. Let me bring in NGO 1144 and then CGIRA. NGO.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for the platform and the very interesting discussion today morning. Co-Chairs, we keep in mind the requirement you made that we should probably look forward to develop some solution or compromises and move forward like by the time COP16 arrives. So with this in view, we want to just add a couple of thoughts, trying to figure out what needs to be done in case of non-monetary benefit sharing, at least by COP16. Co-chairs, we must keep in mind that we are not generally making a law like Nagoya Protocol for the parties to decide nationally what benefits, what they want to seek from the users of DSI, genetic resources. That's what is Nagoya Protocol, and we are not doing some general law like that here. We are creating a multilateral mechanism, and the approach, and there is a problem in standardizing sharing of non-monetary benefits which are acknowledged across by parties now. And the kind of approach we have taken in the proposed elements is to kind of say that, okay, we don't have time and we don't create an obligation on users of DSI, creating further complexities. Let's perhaps make it non-obligatory, voluntary out there. I think this approach needs to be changed. What we perhaps can do is that we recognize there needs to be an obligation on sharing non-monetary benefits, and the modalities to do so can be developed by us over a period of time. Perhaps we can look into sector-specific requirements. We can look into the nature of the products and technologies developed using DSI, and we can also look into other features. Like, for example, you have an enclosure A about some sectors sharing monetary benefits, but we can do a similar thing for non-monetary benefits, identify sector-specific requirements, and create an obligatory framework under which non-monetary benefits can be shared. We can propose some language. At this stage, we think it's not time yet because parties are also not engaging necessarily into the kind of negotiation on language, so we're not proposing it at this stage. With regard to the proposal for new database from Egypt, we take note of EU welcoming to check the added value for this proposal. Also, Australia's consideration to consider or explore these issues further. And in this regard, we would like to make a couple of comments. First, we know the proposals here before us has a clear basis on the EU understanding about DSI, that where it argues when DSI is deposited in public databases, ABS should be multilateralized. Now, for this to be meaningful to other countries and other parties, it is important for them that the existing databases share DSI, which is deposited in public databases after taking their consent. Otherwise, they cannot exercise their sovereign rights recognized under the convention. So we are worried. This is the most important aspect of having an accountable database to the multilateral mechanism. Now, if you look into the proposed elements, we also worry that the proposals treat parties sponsoring the major sequence databases that are currently sharing DSI publicly parties with their own national databases, and parties without national capacities to store DSI internally on the same pedestal. Now, if you look at the former category of parties have certain obligations to respect the rights of other parties in the convention, and the databases sponsored by them has to take certain measures not to frustrate such rights. The last category of parties, on the other hand, needs an international assistance under various provisions of the convention for the implementation of the decision. Otherwise, parties without national capacities to store internally end up sharing more DSI with multilateral mechanism, while parties with national databases keep developing practices to prevent DSI being deposited in public databases. So unless these differences are addressed, we would not ensure a fair and equitable sharing of benefit sharing. Now, considering the concerns regarding track and trace and open access, you just now saw that the way we're currently progressing is going on the opposite direction, because trust in the system will be lost for two reasons. First, there is no guarantee on benefit sharing obligations. Second, there is also no platform which respects the rights of the rights of the countries to share on the genetic resources, because when the DSI is shared, they're not verifying it's based on the national law. So we would move to seclude more and more DSI away from it and creates problems. Therefore, we think it is important to have this database. Last 2 points on the cost of cost of new database. We have a study from the CBD Commission study which looks into the cost of databases. Taking records, we would say like it was for INSDC, the annual maintenance cost is managed as 50 million per annum, and it's just like I would say what is less than, for example, if you look at a project funded by certain governments on biosurveillance, it's 10 billion. So it's like 10 billion is 200 times 50 million. So you have relatively enough funds available to maintain a database. It's not a big cost in that sense. And we also think, finally, that it is very important to have some form of system which would put into place the accountable sharing of DSI so that and it's not necessarily violating open access. The last point on this is what has been said by a scientist from University of Montreal, where he said that strong ABS principles are in fact in the spirit of open access, and he calls for better accountable databases. Thank you.
Very much indeed, Third World Network. That's very clear. Let's hear from CGIAR, and then Brazil have requested the floor. CGIAR.
Yeah, we agree that the inclusion of the word including would be very appropriate, given that the new language introduced into paragraph 3 focuses entirely on non-monetary benefit sharing associated with the use of DSI, and we think that probably a lot of countries have interests that go beyond that. We'd like to build on Brazil's observation that it's not just users but others that contribute to non-monetary benefit sharing, also mentioned by the EU and Australia that there's already a system, a very wide and decentralized system whereby non-monetary benefits are generated and shared, and that's a system that we need to maintain. But I guess the question before us here is, do we want to do something in this context to increase incentives for that system to work more? Do we want to introduce something at this moment to try to move that needle still further, whereby those actors who are already engaged in this decentralized system of generating and sharing non-monetary benefits go further? What kind of incentives could we be introducing at this moment in this context? As mentioned by Switzerland. Just an example of such a thing would be to call upon donor agencies to require or to include a portion of their support for engaging in demonstrable non-monetary benefit sharing on behalf of the agencies that they're funding. That's something that could be reported against on a monetary framework and measured quite easily over time. You could have a time series investigation of that. And of course, the agencies that they're funding could also report against such metrics, provided that they were granular enough and captured the kinds of non-monetary benefit sharing that they're producing. I work in an international agricultural research organization. We develop, for example, new crop varieties, which we make available publicly, usually for free for anybody in the world to use. That's something we could report against and would be quite happy to do so. In fact, it would be an incentive for us to do it, do more, probably. Finally, with respect to the proposal for a centralized database, in light of the clarification from Egypt, perhaps what isn't being proposed is not a new database that reproduces all the data that's already out there in the extraordinarily complex universe of databases, but something to link them, in which case that's something that would be interesting to look at connective tissue between databases. But in the meantime, I would just note, well, the same figures that my colleague from TWN just noted, but to note that yes, at least in one of the studies commissioned by the CBD on the public and private databases and DSI tracing, yeah, it's $50 million a year just for the 3 INSDC databases. There are hundreds, thousands of other databases out there that are absolutely essential in their operation for the ongoing science. In fact, we have a side event today wherein we will be focusing on and describing the very complex universe of databases that exist for each crop within which we're working. So I think if one were to extrapolate from that and think about including all of those in a centralized database, we're talking about hundreds of millions, hundreds and hundreds of millions to do such that. And I think that's important to bear in mind when considering this proposal. Thank you very much.
IAR. Let's hear from Brazil and then the European Union. Brazil.
The floor again, but I think that might allow me to make a quick reaction to what other colleagues have said. I'd just like to begin by adding one minor comment on 4bis, which mentions the provision information of the country of origin of DSI. There might be some ambiguity in there in the sense that I think what we want to focus is the country of origin of the genetic resources that gave origin to DSI, not where the country where DSI was produced, right? Now, I would just like to maybe reacting to some comments that I heard to reemphasize my point on what we do not want, we do not think it would be feasible, would be to insist on bilateral arrangements through multilateral mechanisms. That's not the idea. The idea is in the lines of what South Africa commented, and we strongly support the statement from South Africa that monetary benefits received by the multilateral mechanism could in turn provide for non-monetary benefits through programs. If you understood correctly the idea put forward by South Africa, that's exactly what we tried to convey earlier. That makes all the difference. That also, we frankly, we do not see how non-monetary benefits could be conveyed to a multilateral mechanism if it's not indirectly. How would the negotiation take part? Because there would be need for negotiating. I mean, there is no interest in that companies providing whatever benefit, non-monetary benefit they want to provide with no further consideration who's going to receive that, of the actual needs of people, of countries, of indigenous peoples and local communities and so on. So there we need to be some kind of bridging between what the companies would be willing to offer and what the receivers would want to receive. But we are talking about companies dealing with the whole parties of the CBD. It's not feasible. That's a quite different situation, a quite different scenario from a bilateral arrangement. That's why I mentioned it does make sense if you have a bilateral arrangement to make that kind of negotiation, because then you have one company on one side and you have another community on the other side, and it makes sense. Now, if you want to transpose that situation to the multilateral mechanism, it simply doesn't fit. That's why we strongly think that we should focus on monetary benefits. And monetary benefits channeled to the multilateral mechanism could in turn provide for non-monetary benefits. I think that's the right approach. And having said that, I would also like to quickly react to many comments that I heard, all from developed country parties, in line of trying to water down the provisions that are proposed in the country. There are several proposals to replace wording with encourage and so on, replacing should with encourage. I would like to recall that the whole mandate for these negotiations is a very strong political mandate reached at COP15. And COP15 decision 15/9, which is the basis for all our works here, says very clearly the benefits from the use of digital sequence information and genetic resources should be shared fairly and equitably. And that's the language that we are aiming to, in order to respect and to fulfill, to respect the political decision that was reached in COP15 and to fulfill the mandate that was given to us. And watering down provisions will not help us going down that direction. I will not delve into legal discussions in here. I'm just saying that there's a clear political decision to go that way. That's as clear as it gets. The benefits from the use of DSI should be shared fair and equitably. That's the language from decision 15/9. And that's the spirit that shall be reflected in the language of the provisions that we will agree in the multilateral mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil, and please don't apologize for taking the floor. We're finding this, this exchange that we're having now very, very helpful and very thought-provoking. So please, let's keep going. I think we're digging through, we're excavating some very interesting ideas. This is great. So let's hear from the European Union and then Japan. EU, you have the floor.
And thank you for the opportunity to continue to contribute to the discussion. A few reflections on what has been discussed this morning. First, I think it is fair to say that we now have heard a number of interventions that, and I think Norway was the first one to talk about that, to highlight the fact that it could be useful to reflect on how to showcase non-monetary benefits that are shared or have been shared. And I think that such reporting could be done in a more centralized way through existing platforms, including the clearinghouse. And I think that is really very useful. I think that it's also useful to bear in mind that there is quite an opportunity for data mining on existing platforms and existing sort of IT systems that allows to sort of go to where knowledge has been shared, where there are joint research results and so on and so forth. And I think for that purpose, especially for the monitoring of non-monetary benefits, that showcasing is really important. I think that we are somehow in the danger of getting lost in terminology, because for us, as I said in my first intervention, the key around non-monetary benefit sharing is exactly as Brazil has said, the non-monetary benefit sharing that goes between partners. And I would say it's not just companies, it's also universities, academic institutions. They all share non-monetary benefits. And I think, as others have said, that needs to go on. Now, we need to say, okay, and what is it that the multilateral mechanism can do in that perspective? And I agree with South Africa and Brazil that putting these ongoing cooperation in a straitjacket by saying it has to go through the multilateral mechanism will actually not serve any purpose. But I think South Africa has put the finger really on the issue by saying, well, what is behind non-monetary benefit is a lot of capacity building, knowledge sharing, tech transfer, and other things. So maybe the multilateral mechanism can actually provide some of those things through funding. But then we're making the linking back to the monetary benefit sharing, which actually is the money that the fund will get. And I find the proposal by South Africa to think in terms of the fund of having a dedicated sort of window in that regard interesting, and I think we should discuss that further in view of moving forward. It's really fascinating to hear the different interpretations of what a new database could cost and could do under CBD. And I have listened very carefully to Egypt earlier, enumerating a large number of functions for that central database. Now, in its second intervention, it sounded as if that was a very modest undertaking, just mainly focusing on monitoring and things like that, and also making reference to a Cartagena protocol database that is in the Biosafety Clearinghouse. And I'm wondering whether the Secretariat could perhaps clarify what the scope of that database is and how it relates to the enormous amount of data that you would have to deal with under DSI. I mean, I heard a reference to a couple of hundred data entries. I mean, when you think about the volume of data traffic that happens on DSI databases, I'm wondering how you could, as CGIAR has also clearly said, how you could actually try to combine that in one specific database managed by the CBD Secretariat. I also think that with regard to the issue of data governance, there are very general considerations in Decision 15.9 with regard to data governance, but there's actually no very specific operational provisions that force us to go in one or the other direction. So I think that we are open to discuss how the monitoring could be better organized, how non-monetary benefit sharing that takes place could be better showcased. But I think the whole idea of linking databases to compliance assurance for national legislation is clearly one thing that makes us very uncomfortable in view of the very clear direction that Decision 15/9 has given us. And maybe a short explanation by the Secretariat on this database in the context of the Cartagena protocol on LMOs would actually be helpful to understand whether there is sort of a commonality or whether that is something completely different. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU. Let's bring in Japan and then Norway, and we will pick up your question for the Secretariat. Japan.
Chair, we support the intervention made by CGIAR. There are existing public databases already, so creating new databases would lead to fragmentation. And in this respect, we have some comment on paragraph 4 bis. 4 bis says provision of information on the country of origin of DSI. We think this wording is contradictory because track and trace of DSI is not practical. So this is paragraph 4 bis. It seems to be going against Decision 15/9. Thank you.
Norway and then NGO 1153.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will not ask for your forgiveness for taking the floor. Yeah, so I was just consulting with my colleagues. So regarding Argentina's point, so I think we have to look at non-monetary benefit sharing in relation to other things and developments in the CBD. There is a matchmaking function within the NBSAP accelerator partnership, where countries they sort of display their needs, and there's a matchmaking mechanism with providers, and that can be monetary or non-monetary. So this should be looked at as one of several possible solutions or incentives, because this matchmaking function is needs-based and be SAP-based and country-driven, right? So again, we're not operating in a vacuum on DSI. You know, we are sort of part of the GBF family, and squarely so. So we should look at, the point is we should look at sort of ongoing developments and how we can connect to those developments. My second point is a legal one regarding terminology and language. I think, you know, at least what I learned in public international law was that if we are talking about a treaty that is a legally binding instrument, we use shall. So that's sort of what separates a legally binding instrument that is a treaty from other soft law kind of instruments. And in my view, we are free to use should. I don't see any danger of that. So I think we have to think about what kind of language we use, but in my view, I think should is definitely fine. What we should refrain from is using shall. Thank you.
We shall refrain from using shall, shouldn't we? Very good. Okay. Thank you for that very helpful intervention, Norway. So let's hear from. I'm keen to keep going. I think we're working through a lot of really good material, and it's extremely helpful for the co-chairs. So please just keep going. Let's hear from NGO 1153. Please tell us who you are. I'm sorry that we don't know.
Hi, I'm not an NGO. I'm from academia, from the DSI Scientific Network, and as one of many database geeks here, I can't help but also want to comment on the Egyptian proposal. Just to give the CBD Secretariat some ideas of what that task might look like in real terms, that would mean dozens of PhD informatic-trained staff that you would need to hire. You would need to be technically equipped to handle petabytes of data. I looked that up. That's 1 million gigabytes, so it's a lot. So get some computers and handle the additional technological infrastructure. And as colleagues have already pointed out, interconnectivity and data exchange with thousands of other databases, as well as, of course, other types of scientific data like microscopic data, gene expression data, protein structures, cellular processing data, et cetera. So you have a lot of interconnectivity ahead of you as well. And then perhaps the most important point, in addition to the concerns on tracking and tracing, is that the INSDC members, and they, of course, share this burden across 3 different member institutions, which you wouldn't have the luxury to do, is they have thousands of submissions per week, including over the Christmas holidays. And so manually checking to conform with national ABS legislation would be quite a significant numerical task. So in short, and I hope I'm not being overly flippant, I am somewhat skeptical that this is compatible with the auspices of a UN Secretariat at all, ever. And ultimately, if we look back at the text of the Nagoya Protocol, countries exercise their sovereign rights, which are, of course, absolutely uncontested, when genetic resources are accessed. There is no database checkpoint foreseen in either the CBD nor its Nagoya Protocol. Alternatively, and of course in the spirit of compromise, I would like to talk to Egypt and to other colleagues to understand this, and as CGIR pointed out so nicely, this idea of connective tissue, and as raised by the EU. I remember in the IAG discussions when this issue was raised, my first response was actually of delight, because I actually do think that a central node for non-monetary benefit sharing indicator data is hugely important and can be very powerful for transparency, reproducibility, scientific integrity. And so thinking about how and whether a global database, a global platform could capture non-monetary benefits is an important conversation to be had. And similarly, whether a matchmaking platform on DSI-related capacity building or partnering with other UN institutions like UNESCO that has a matchmaking scientist platform might be really powerful here. And ultimately, as the senior author on the study commissioned by the CBD Secretariat on the most exciting topic ever of ABS indicators, we do know that we will have the enjoyable task to connect our work here to the KMGBF monitoring framework. And right now, my current reading of the text that you proposed doesn't quite yet do that. So we need to connect the non-monetary benefit sharing outcomes to Goal C.2, non-monetary benefits arising from international ABS instruments. However, encouragingly, the list that you have in the enclosure has those things there, so maybe just a textual note to C.2 would be helpful. In the interest of time, I'll shorten this here, but the DSI using academic community thinks that there's a lot of open questions here, which we have listed out and we will submit on the floor statement. But ultimately, we want to tease your imagination of whether or not this topic doesn't deserve a richer analysis. You had a revenue-generating study, of course, in the last intersessional period, and maybe the next intersessional period could address this big open question of non-monetary benefits, maybe a pilot or proof of concept on what a non-monetary benefit sharing global indicator platform database might look like could be helpful to parties before COP17. And a final little note on para 4 bis, since that's gotten up into discussions as well. We do note that there is not 100% overlap between fair and care, and the words open science that are listed in para 9F of decision 15.9. So you might actually, in that list in 4 bis, also want to bring in para 9F. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, DSI Scientific Network. That's very helpful. Let's hear from the UK and then NGO 1147, United Kingdom.
Mr. Co-Chair, I'd first like to pick up on the interesting suggestion and ideas from South Africa around having some of the funds within the Global Fund ring-fenced for non-monetary benefit sharing. And I would like to remind us that I think we discussed around a very similar idea around ring-fencing funds for capacity building in the very early days of our discussions on this. And I think that was something generally that most parties were broadly supportive of. So I think it's an interesting idea which we can bring back. In a similar vein, actually, I think the matchmaking platform is also something that's been floated around in some earlier discussions, and we might do quite well to look back at some of those previous ideas too. So I think that's interesting. And then the other point that I would like to make, I think it's really helpful to demonstrate where non-monetary benefit sharing has taken place. And in fact, the reflections paper by the co-chairs, so that's 2/2 add 1, recognises the benefit of doing that, or the potential benefit of doing that for monetary benefits. And we do understand from some academic users as well that being able to demonstrate that they have shared non-monetary benefit through some global platform would be welcome. So I think that's an idea to explore further too. Thank you.
UK, NG 1147.
Chair, for giving me the floor. I speak on behalf of the NGO Ecoropa, and we have now heard that there are many public databases that work very well for what they do, that they're a great tool for researchers, but we know that they're not set up to help us with benefit sharing. And we, as CBD, we could try to influence these databases to collect the information that would be relevant for the CBD, but building on the proposal of Egypt, or what the colleague from CGIAR called connective tissue, maybe what we need is simply a DSI clearinghouse, so a database where just the sequence, or maybe just the unique identifier of the sequences are uploaded. And as I understand, these unique identifiers already exist in the public databases. And then all the CBD would need to do is add the information that is relevant for benefit sharing, like the country of origin, the territories of IPLCs where the information is coming from, or maybe some other relevant information. So it wouldn't be a database for researchers to do their work. It would be just a single stop place to go for any user who wants to know or wants to check on the benefit sharing information that exists for the thing they are working with. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed, Ecoropa. The European Union had some questions for the Secretariat with respect to other databases maintained by it. Secretariat, thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Yes, so to provide some additional information regarding the Biosafety Clearinghouse that has been mentioned in a couple of interventions, the Biosafety Clearinghouse is established under Article 20 of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, and has specific roles in facilitating information sharing under the protocol. In particular, parties have certain obligations under the protocol to share information through the Biosafety Clearinghouse. This includes sharing information on parties' risk assessments of living modified organisms and their decisions on living modified organisms. So as part of this, as part of, sort of enabling parties to share information on these categories of information, the Biosafety Clearinghouse includes a category of records on genetic elements. This category of record provides information on introduced genetic elements, including the donor organism, the type of genetic elements, the biological function, and the biotechnological trait. The records on the Biosafety Clearinghouse on genetic elements are then used for creating records on living modified organisms, so that the records on living modified organisms can then be linked to parties' records on their risk assessments and on decisions on living modified organisms. Checking the Biosafety Clearinghouse now before coming up here, we currently have 861 records in the genetic elements category on the Biosafety Clearinghouse. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Secretariat, for that very helpful clarification. We don't have any more requests for the floor on non-monetary benefit sharing. We've had a very, I think, a very useful discussion, actually. So we've heard a number of reflections on the text of paragraph 3 in particular. Some of those reflections have moved on into paragraph 4 and some of the additions in paragraph 4 as well, including a proposal from Egypt, which has been discussed quite extensively. We heard, I think, as well, some suggestions for ways in which enclosure B can be streamlined, some duplication can be removed, the drafting can be improved. We've captured all of those. I think there's also been a very helpful discussion about what's the function of non-monetary benefit sharing within the multilateral mechanism. So a recognition that there is non-monetary benefit sharing happening already, and that there might be a call for a better way of making that available to people, making people aware of that non-monetary benefit sharing, but also making it sort of enabling the matchmaking. That's a word we've heard a few times. So there's a discussion we've had about that. There's also a discussion about the relevance, whether it's possible for non-monetary benefits to be shared through a multilateral mechanism. And I think that we need to look at some of the wording in the decision to be very precise about how we imagine the multilateral mechanism actually operating with respect to non-monetary benefits. And we had an exchange as well about an idea that actually one of the things that we might want to be trying to achieve is setting aside or making sure that a certain amount of funding is being used, funding through the multilateral mechanism, through the Global Fund, is being used for the purposes of non-monetary or building capacity, which in itself is a non-monetary benefit sharing. So quickly the concepts become, they move into areas of grey, and I think our job, having heard that very good discussion, is to try and capture that for you in text. That is what we'll do. So we will work on improving the text on paragraph 3 and enclosure B, and we will provide you with an update at another point this week. Right now, I'm going to hand over to my co-chair. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for the summary, and also just to thank you for the constructive discussion. I think there were quite a lot of solutions proposed. I think this is what we are looking for, and we hope that we'll be able to come back with something that is forward-looking the way that you've been proposing it. So since we have some time left before lunch, we thought we could move forward to the second discussion, which is on governance. And this discussion is basically on paragraphs 12, 13, 14 bis, and 14 te. Under this, we have two pre-existing paragraphs that we had submitted in the first document, and then two new paragraphs that were included based on the comments and suggestions that we received yesterday. So we just also want to have an exchange of views on this because we want to develop them further and be able to have some text moving us forward towards the multilateral mechanism that we are trying to develop. So I'll give you a few minutes to prepare yourselves and just get ready to provide comments on paragraphs 12 bis, 13, 14, 14 bis, and 14 te. That's the focus of our discussion in the remaining time. We'll get as far as we can get, and if we are not able to collect all the views, then we'll continue this discussion at a later stage. But we thought we could get this going as a second piece of discussion for today. So I'll wait for you to get ready, and when you're ready, please press your mic and we'll start collecting views, just the same way we've been doing with the discussion on monetary benefit sharing. What are the points that are missing? How can we strengthen these issues? And what other proposals do you have to provide to make sure that we have a good document and good proposals towards the multilateral mechanism? So take your time, and when you're ready, please press the mic and we'll engage into this discussion in the next coming and remaining time. Thank you. We might have done a very wonderful job as co-chairs. And it's okay to say, co-chairs, you have done a good job. I think you can move forward with these paragraphs. All right, and now I see requests for the floor. I shouldn't have said it, otherwise would have just moved forward to something else. All right, so we have Egypt followed by EU. Egypt.
Well, with regard to this point 14 on parties should refrain from putting in place national measures, the issue that you will need to capture the idea that some transboundary movement should take place. I mean, if I am producing sequence in a local database in my own country, and then a national company will produce a product and sell it on my market, how that relates to the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism. There need to be something that they say that if things are conducted all on the national level, maybe the multilateral benefit sharing does not have a role in this regard. And national measures, I think the essence in this phrase is that national measures should be developed to be in compliance with the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, not to prevent them from having national measures. Because when you develop something on the international level, you need something to complete on the national level to see who are the implementing agency who will be telling you who are the relevant IPLCs, who is doing what. So basically, I think that the idea is not well reflected here. Basically, we should be, national measures should not run counterproductive to the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, but they should complement on it. The issue also of when you are accessing a DSI that has a related traditional knowledge. We don't want the DSI to replace the issue of traditional knowledge. Because in some instance, you are accessing the DSI, and at the same time, you are accessing traditional knowledge that is used in some country. And I mean, morally, a database should reflect that these DSI are related to a traditional knowledge for a given country, so that you can go for bilateral or even channeling some sort of non-monetary benefit sharing. I mean, ethically, if I know that such a sequence has been used in some countries, they developed the genetic resource and they did the traditional medicine, they kept everything, and then you get the resource, you put that into bacteria, and you have your own medicine, and you're not sharing anything with them. I mean, ethically, it doesn't look that it is right. And I think those ideas are not well reflected here. And one of the ideas is that on the database, also, you need to make sure that the information that you got have been obtained in a legal way. For example, if I go to your country and I just get a plant, I sequence that and I put that into the database. You will say, information are already in the public domain, but it was not legal. I'm not talking about the past, but I'm talking starting from now. If I just snatch something from a country, I sequence and I put it there, what is the right of that country of origin? I'm not talking about the past, I'm talking about now. The research that has been conducted, even if I take something, I tell you I'm doing that for research, and that without your permission, I put that on the public database. What can you do? It's in the public. And we need to get this understanding that the information being available doesn't mean that it is free for being used. Even if I publish a paper, it's open access. Nobody can just take a copy of a figure that I drafted and do not say that it belongs to this person or reference you. So the information being available doesn't mean it's essentially free to being used. So those ideas need to be reflected somehow, so I'm leaving that in your hand. And I'm sure that you are more than able to reflect those ideas. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Egypt, for the assignment to reflect on the ideas. I'll now give the floor to EU, followed by Togo. EU.
Thank you, Chair. And on these paragraphs, I would say that from the perspective of the EU and its member states, I think the sense of the paragraph 14 is that national measures should not require the sharing of benefits arising from the use of DSI because they're covered in the multilateral mechanism. Now, if the sense of Egypt's comments is that we should rephrase that to say that national measures with regard to DSI should actually focus on facilitating the operation of the multilateral mechanism, I think that could be one way, and I hope that's how Egypt meant it. On 14 bis, we are quite supportive to the spirit of that paragraph, but I think that it doesn't cover the whole range of issues that are related to that, and it should be strengthened to better express the concept and be in line with Decision 59. And I think what we are discussing is that the mechanism under the CBD should be flexible enough to cover sustainable development objectives of other multilateral ABS instruments, the treaty, the pandemics treaty, BB&J, and so on and so forth, in compatibility with CBD objectives, so that the mechanism can be mutually supportive of and adaptable to other access and benefit sharing instruments, because in a way that would be the best. So I think if that paragraph could be a little bit expanded and made it clear that this is not just about sort of mutual support. We need to give some more flesh to this concept in this year. On 14 ter, we would actually feel more comfortable if we used convention language. And I think that here we would actually prefer to say under the authority and guidance of the Conference of the Parties, because that would be sort of having the same, because not introducing any additional concept that we then have to explain anymore. So that would be our comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I'll now give the floor to Togo, followed by Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Madame la coprésidente. Je vais intervenir sur le 14 bis. On sait déjà que le paragraphe 11 de la décision 15-9 a relevé que l'approche de partage juste et équitable des avantages découlant de l'utilisation de l'ICN sur les ressources génétiques appliquées à cette décision n'a pas de conséquences sur les droits et obligations existants au titre de la Convention et du protocole de Nagoya. Tel que formulé, le 14 bis, en se limitant seulement aux instruments internationaux d'accès et de partage des avantages, il y a lieu de voir les relations avec le protocole de Nagoya. Et on risque aussi d'avoir des ambiguïtés, étant donné que le mécanisme multilatéral ne exclut le protocole de Nagoya. Donc, le Togo propose une formulation plus précise et qui reste dans le contexte de la décision 15-9. Si vous le permettez, je la relis. C'est juste un ajout. 14 bis. Le mécanisme multilatéral sera mis en œuvre en coopération avec d'autres instruments internationaux d'accès et de partage des avantages issus de l'utilisation de l'ICN en vue de renforcer l'appui mutuel. Donc, c'est issu de l'utilisation de l'ICN. Parce qu'on sait qu'au niveau du traité international sur les ressources phytogénétiques pour l'alimentation et l'agriculture, il y a aussi des discussions qui se mènent aussi concernant l'ICN pour ce qui est des ressources phytogénétiques pour l'alimentation et l'agriculture. Donc, la complémentarité recherchée doit se situer sur les enjeux liés à l'ICN et non le partage des avantages de façon vague. Voilà. Merci, Madame la coprésidente.
Thank you, Togo. If you could repeat maybe the addition to paragraph 14, it wasn't too clear for us to capture. So if you could come again, microphone to Togo, please.
OK. C'est juste un ajout, une précision. Donc, je reprends entièrement. 14 bis. Le mécanisme multilatéral sera mis en œuvre en coopération avec d'autres instruments internationaux d'accès et de partage des avantages issus de l'utilisation de l'ICN. Donc, issus de l'utilisation de l'ICN, c'est en fait l'ajout que le Togo apporte à cette formulation du 14 bis.
All right, thank you very much. It's clear now, and it has been captured. So we'll now move to Côte d'Ivoire, followed by Jordan, then Norway. Côte d'Ivoire.
Madame la Présidente, mon intervention porte sur le point 14. Je soutiens la proposition faite par l'Égypte et voudrais juste relever qu'hier, dans l'intervention de la Côte d'Ivoire, nous l'avons souligné, on devrait plutôt encourager les partis justement à aligner leurs mesures nationales sur ce qui est en train d'être fait au niveau du cadre, mais pas plutôt leur demander de ne pas prendre de mesures. Ça, c'est la première intervention. La deuxième intervention, c'est que je me pose la question de savoir, comme l'Égypte l'a expliqué, lorsque les ressources sont prises, elles sont séquencées et déposées dans les banques publiques, les banques de données publiques, comment est-ce qu'on fait le pont? Comment on résout un peu ce problème qu'il y a? Parce que rien ne figure. On met tout sur le fait que l'ISN est pris, mais nous oublions le fait que les ressources sont prises. Et actuellement, toutes les demandes vont dans ce sens. On prend la ressource, on séquence et on la dépose dans une banque de gènes. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait par rapport à ça? Merci.
Thank you, Côte d'Ivoire. We hope that as other parties intervene, you'll be able to also get somebody address your questions and it will become clear. So thank you for your comments. We'll now give the floor to Jordan, then Norway, and then Japan. Jordan.
أؤيد ما تفضل به مندوب مصر والاتحاد الأوروبي فيما يتعلق بالبند 14 والذي يحتاج لإعادة صياغة لتوضيح السيادة الوطنية في إجراء التعامل مع الاتفاقية والبروتوكولات الصادرة عنها، حيث أنه لكل طرف الحق في اتخاذ التدابير القانونية للتعامل مع جميع المتطلبات ومنها معلومات التسلسل الرقمي، حيث النص الحالي لا يتسق مع إجراءات الحوكمة المتفق عليها. وفي آلية توزيع المنافع أجد أن هنالك عدم وجود يقين واضح، وقد تم النظر في العديد من التجارب العالمية وهذا يسهل تحديد الخيارات المناسبة. كما ذكرنا خلال مداخلتنا بالأمس حول مفهوم ثراء التنوع البيولوجي وما هي المعايير المتبعة لذلك أن تحدد وتذكر بشكل واضح بتعريف واضح أو أن يتم حذفها من النص. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Jordan, for your comments. I'll give the floor now to Norway and then Japan, followed by Switzerland. Norway.
Madam Chair, my comment is on 14 bis regarding cooperation with other international access and benefit sharing instruments. So DSI is an area of shared interests and competences. South Africa had, in a previous meeting, a very interesting approach and idea about a forum, I believe, if I remember correctly. And we had some discussions on that. I do think we need some kind of a cooperative mechanism to sort of enhance coherence and to prevent fragmentation. Because DSI, as I said, is an area of shared interest and also competences. We have different instruments that all use the same public databases for different purposes. So we have to maintain mutual supportiveness and coherence so we can reap the benefits that are common to us all. So we need a comprehensive approach. This could be what we call a collective arrangement. A collective arrangement is an arrangement between instruments. It's more than a memory of understanding, an MOU. That is between secretariats, which I believe the CBD already has with a lot of secretariats like the WHO, and also I believe the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources. So this is something else. This is between parties. It's a collective arrangement. And we already have examples of collective arrangements between international instruments. So in case this would not be the first of its kind, there is at least one, so it's a known concept. And it would be like moving more away from the pure sectoral approach and a step towards ambitions of a more comprehensive approach, which we would need in the field of DSI to make the benefit sharing arrangements work between instruments. So this is it's not a new idea. It's something that's out there already, and is something we think from the Norwegian side should be explored, and which should be an addition to 14 bis. I have language to that end. I don't have to give it now, but I have it ready in case. Thank you.
Please, we are ready to hear the language. You could give it now.
Off my mic. And forgive me for taking the floor. So it would read as the second sentence in 14 bis, and it would read, a process with a view to adopting a collective arrangement between the instruments will be initiated. Full stop. I repeat, a process with a view to adopting a collective arrangement between the instruments will be initiated. Thank you.
Thank you, Noe. And I think, like my co-chair said, no need to apologize for providing the solutions that we need. So this is encouraged because we do want those suggestions and be able to improve what is already existing on the table. So thank you very much. We'll now give the floor to Japan, followed by Switzerland, and then UK.
Madam Chair, our comment is on paragraph 14. Paragraph 14 talks about national measures. So we propose to add at the end of paragraph 14 that parties currently domestically operating bilateral arrangements on DSI cannot opt in this mechanism, thus cannot receive disbursement from the fund. That is a first suggestion. On paragraph 14 bis, it talks about relation with other international fora. Our suggestion is to, at the end of this 14 bis, to add users that make contributions to DSI benefit sharing scheme under other fora are not required to make contributions to this mechanism. The Executive Secretary is requested to coordinate with other relevant international fora to avoid double contribution for the same product. We heard from Norway the collective arrangement. I think this idea would need to be explored a bit further. For the time being, we would suggest we could request Executive Secretary to coordinate with other relevant international fora. And we also would like to make sure that this mechanism runs independent of and does not create any additional nor affect existing rights and obligations under the Convention and the Nagoya Protocol. And we would like to make sure it does not affect rights and obligations under other relevant international fora. We have provided this language in writing. There is a report published by law firm, which is on the Secretariat website. The law firm Covington and Barring, LLP, titled The Impact of Coexisting ABS Obligations. And the report says proliferation of ABS systems creates extraordinary legal complexity. We deeply agree with this report and this point. That is why we think this kind of insertion is necessary. Thank you.
All right, Japan, please come back and repeat the proposals. We were not able to capture everything, so just the proposals, if you could repeat them.
Yes,
and speak slowly because the interpreters also struggled.
Okay, my proposal for para 14, at the end of para 14, parties currently domestically operating bilateral arrangements on DSI cannot opt in this mechanism, thus cannot receive disbursement from the fund. My proposal for 14
and then for the
bis,
next one,
shall I continue? For 14 bis, our suggestion is to add users that make contributions to DSI benefit sharing scheme under other fora are not required to make contributions to this mechanism, comma, the executive secretary is requested to coordinate with other relevant international fora to avoid double contribution for the same product. And in the end, we would like to add the following. This mechanism runs independent of and does not create any additional, comma, nor affect existing rights and obligations under the Convention and the Nagoya Protocol, full stop. It does not affect rights and obligations under other relevant international fora, full stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan, for the clarity. Now we'll move forward to Switzerland and then UK, followed by Australia. Switzerland.
Chair. So I also have a general comment which relates to some of these paragraphs, in particular 13 and 14. Here I really want to recall that we are of the view that the multilateral mechanism that we are establishing should be purely multilateral. And so with regard to paragraph 13, we are also of the view that the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities are very important and they need to be respected. But in this regard, we also should be very careful not to create any requirements or any expectations of tracking and tracing, which would then create some kind of bilateral elements within this multilateral mechanism, because then we are moving away from a purely multilateral mechanism. Then also in paragraph 14, we are of the view that, as expressed by Japan, the parties that do actually operate national measures on benefit sharing from the use of DSI, they should not be part of this multilateral mechanism, because this would then lead to potential double obligations or double payments. And so we are also of the view that parties that operate national measures should not be eligible to receive funds from the multilateral mechanism. So we support Japan's proposal on paragraph 14. Then similarly also in paragraph 14 bis, we are of the view that this is very important, that there is mutual supportiveness and coordination among different instruments, but this is also not enough, so we must make sure that there are no double obligations and no double payments between these different fora and instruments. And in that regard, we also support the proposal from Japan, which makes clear that there is only one payment and one obligation, and that there will be no overlaps from these different mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland, for your submission. I'll now give the floor to UK, followed by Australia, then China.
Chair, on paragraph 14, for the UK, it's important that users of DSI are very clear about which channel they should be sharing benefits through. And if multiple channels exist through bilateral and multilateral, then that is not clear. So this is a really important paragraph for us. But it needs to be specific in that we're talking about national bilateral measures. Of course, under paragraph 5, parties are given the option of putting in place national measures for sharing through the multilateral mechanism. So to make that clearer in this paragraph, I would just like to suggest that we add the word bilateral. So it would read, parties should refrain from putting in place national bilateral measures that require the sharing of benefits. And the paragraph continues. On paragraph 14 bis, we think this is another really important paragraph. But others have said, it's not quite clear enough. We do need to ensure that other international processes can recognise themselves in this paragraph. I think that's really important. And that we develop a mechanism that is flexible enough for those other international instruments to collaborate, to cooperate, or indeed to plug in, should they wish to do so. And I think the paragraph can be improved along the suggestions that others have made to ensure that it does that. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Now it's Australia, and then China, then Chile. Australia.
I think on paragraph 14, I think we've had many suggestions from around the room, and I think that the idea behind this, and we need to be clear about it, is that if you have national measures in place or legislation in place for digital sequence information, that you're not also, that you've agreed the benefits in that mechanism, and so getting any other benefits from the multilateral mechanism is almost double dipping. So I think we just need to clarify the language around that. It's certainly not restricting national legislation or national applications, in my view, but making sure that you can choose which mechanism you want to opt into or opt out of. So I think Japan's language could be worked upon to come to that. I think on paragraph 14, I agree with the UK. It's a really important paragraph, and while others are looking to the CBD to have some sort of digital sequence solution that might help them forward, we're also looking to them. And so having that mutual supportiveness is not the only thing. It's actually allowing them to have their own access and benefit sharing mechanisms or benefit sharing mechanisms in place that complement and don't overstep other instruments, which means that there does need to be something as proposed by Japan to avoid that multiple contribution for the same DSI. And I see that happening potentially with the BBNJ in particular, where the digital sequence information can be produced under both, and both should not have to have contributions by the one organisation. So I think Norway's proposal on a collective arrangement, I think we should explore that a little bit more, and who will participate, what will it cover, all of those sorts of things. But I think something like that could help to avoid this and track which is being, I don't like it, sorry, I shouldn't use the word track, but help understand which the contributions are being, which contributions are being made under which instrument. And, there needs to be an open door, if you like, so that we can have that, I think as the UK mentioned, it's the, can they opt into another benefit sharing arrangement or mechanism? Can others just say, well, let's just opt into the ABS or the benefit sharing mechanism that's under the CBD, or vice versa? And so this is the open door to potentially looking at, joining up these mechanisms in the future. So the language here is really, really important. And I think that we can build upon the language that's been proposed by others in the room. Thank you, Chair.
China.
谢谢共同主席。我们对第14段和第14 bis 有如下意见。首先，我们在多边机制的决议中，应当鼓励各个缔约方制定与多边机制协调一致的国内措施。这些国内措施呢，可以包括立法的、行政的、政策的和技术标准等措施。 这些措施呢，应该是支持多边机制在国内的实施。理由呢如下。在目前来看，多边机制的具体运作机制呢，还需要深入的讨论才能更明确。对于像有些段落提出的，由国内的用户直接捐赠，或者是通过国家机构捐赠等，可能都需要采取国内的措施，才能够进一步的执行。这是其中的一个理由。第二个理由呢，是如果我们在多边机制的运行和国内措施有一个协调配合的话，才能更好的推动昆明蒙特利尔全球生物多样性框架的落实。在国内措施当中，把多边机制整合到国家生物多样性战略等一系列国内政策当中去推动它落实，会更有成效。我们的第二点意见是，缔约方大会可以为多边机制在国内的实施提供指导，可以通过制定指南、行为准则、最佳实践等方式，指导缔约方加强在国内措施和多边机制的协调。我们的第三个意见呢，是针对14 bis 的。因为 DSI 它涉及到公共卫生、涉及到海洋、涉及到知识产权等领域，这些领域呢，在国际上也有相应的组织正在达成一些国际协定，或者已经达成一些协定。很多国家呢都是多个国际法的缔约方，在国内呢也需要制定相应的措施去落实其他国际法下的义务。因此呢，在协调国际文书方面，也需要也可以通过缔约方大会制定相应的指南、准则，或者是最佳实践，指导缔约方加强不同国际法在国内的执行。以上呢是我们的一些建议，谢谢主席。
Thank you very much, China. And before we move to Chile, just to indicate that for parties that providing textual suggestions, please always do that in dictation speed so that our interpreters can capture it, but also the ones taking the notes are able to capture them clearly. And also a reminder that please speak slowly for the interpreters as well. So these two reminders, please bear in mind. Now we'll move to Chile and then Argentina. Chile.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Prometo hablar más despacio hoy día para beneficio de los intérpretes. En relación a los comentarios de Chile, son en relación al artículo 14 bis o al párrafo 14 bis. Es importante tener presente que el espíritu de este párrafo es buscar una coherencia y una consistencia entre los distintos espacios multilaterales donde se negocian y discuten mecanismos para la distribución de beneficios derivados del uso de secuencias digitales. Ese es el espíritu, al menos desde la visión que tenemos en Chile. En ese sentido, es importante primero ser precisos cuando hablamos respecto al acceso a beneficios, para identificar que estamos hablando de acceso a beneficios provenientes de DSIs o secuencias digitales. En ese sentido, propongo que se agregue en el párrafo una referencia explícita a el acceso y distribución de beneficios de secuencias digitales. Al mismo tiempo, hay que ser cuidadosos y ser conscientes de que cada proceso multilateral tiene su propia autonomía y nosotros en este proceso no tenemos autoridad o mandato para dar directrices a otros procesos. Sin embargo, sí es importante buscar esa coherencia y esa consistencia, promoviendo la cooperación y la colaboración con estos otros foros. En ese sentido, Chile propone que en la parte final del párrafo 14 bis, en el cual se señala con la mirada de fortalecer un soporte mutuo o un apoyo mutuo, se agregue también y consistencia cuando sea apropiado. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chile, and a big improvement in terms of speed. Keep it up. All right, so now we'll go to Argentina and then Brazil. Argentina.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. Let me refer to 14 and 14 bis from our side. Let me first characterize what, in our view, 14 means as it is. It seems to us it's an ask to parties to refrain from the exercise of a sovereign right. So that's what we're asking here. And that's our reading of the paragraph as it is. And we think it's a big ask, actually. It could be something that it's the outcome of this negotiation. We're not sure yet. So we have to say that we still think a lot of work has to be done to understand whether or not we're going to have this paragraph in this text. I've heard proposals, for example, to say that we should exclude countries that have national legislation from the mechanism. We take note of that proposal. We heard that some think that if you have national legislation, that means double payment. I think in some cases it could be, but maybe it doesn't in specific cases, also taking into account the situation in which public databases operate, which is quite wide. They have different ranges of DSI, they have different sequences deposited where in some cases we know where they came from, in other cases we don't. So it's a bit complicated to say if you have national legislation and you benefit from the multilateral mechanism, there's going to be always double payment. There may be cases in which there is not, in our view. And in any case, we should clearly identify what kind of national measures are we referring to, which is not so clarified in these 2 lines of paragraph 14. So maybe at this stage, we take note of the references and those that support it, maybe even enhancing paragraph 14, but at least Argentina will not be able to accept paragraph 14 in the text. And we would be happy to revisit paragraph 14 once we see actually how the mechanism looks like. What are the trigger points? What are the disbursement policies that we will have? How much countries will benefit from it? And then we will understand if actually it's a good giveaway to say we will not take national measures on this regard. On 14 bis, maybe a different approach. We do agree with many of the things that have been said. We do think it's very important to actually further develop 14 bis to show that the mechanism will be mutually supportive of other multilateral agreements and ABS instruments, and that it will seek coherence. We do think that a reference to avoid double contribution, as said by Japan and Switzerland, might be useful here. We have to take into account that other ABS instruments have processes underway, and they may change a bit the ecosystem that we have right now. So whatever we decide at COP16 has to be also respectful of whatever those processes finalize agreeing on. But we think that given that we're talking about a COP decision and in many cases legally binding agreements, there has to be some kind of clause that this COP decision does not undermine any of those legally binding agreements. And this is something that we would like to see included in the text. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. We'll move to Brazil, and then I see that we're running out of time, so we'll decide how we move forward. Brazil.
We would start by highlighting a paragraph that so far I think hasn't been mentioned, which is 12 bis. I think 12 bis is extremely important. I'd like to draw attention that we had a version of this paragraph on the report from the first meeting was paragraph 51 that was listed on the elements on which there is a need for further discussion, which always puzzled us because who could be against such a general statement in favor of principles of inclusivity, equity, and transparency. So I'm happy to see, at least my understanding is that everyone abides by those very basic and general principles, and that's a very positive, there's a very positive development. On paragraph 13, we were a bit puzzled and we still struggle to understand the comment by Switzerland regarding the need to respect or not to respect. We couldn't quite understand what was the gist of the Swiss comment, because I think again we are talking just this is a very general statement on the need to respect the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, and I'm sure no country in this room is against that. So I don't think we should send a bad political sign in questioning this very basic general principle. On paragraph 14, I think the idea behind paragraph 14 is that we want to avoid duplication, potential duplication of the demands of share and benefits. So I think maybe the paragraph could read something like parties should refrain from putting in place national measures that duplicates the share of benefits arising from the use of DSI, maybe something along those lines, because I think that's what we are aiming to. I'd just like to draw attention that I listened carefully to many proposals made by developed countries, and I don't see in this particular session any mention to encourage or to the watering down that has been done in the previous round of negotiation, and I think that's concerning. That's a worrying matter, because it does send us a political sign that maybe we're applying a double standard here. From the point of view of Brazil, we would be very happy to have should in here, provided that we have similar language in other parts of the text. What we cannot have is to apply one criteria to one part of the text that interests us, and then apply a different criteria to other parts of the text that are not so interested to our national concerns. That's not good usage. So several countries, all of them developed countries, use very strong language when referring to the items in this section, and this strongness contrasts to their position when referring to other parts of the text that are of interest to other countries. So again, I think this is something that should be on our minds. On paragraph 14 bis, we support what several parties have said. I think we have a general agreement in that of course we need to have this all those ABS systems functioning harmonically. And we're happy to support the proposal by Chile. We're ready to make a proposal along similar lines, saying something like to enhancing mutual supportiveness and coherence. I think it will be important to send, because we're not only talking about mutual support, but also to ensure that those systems do not overlap or do not create a legal uncertainty, but that they work in harmony. And just also to support the comment that was made by Argentina, but to complement what was said, that works both ways. That means CBD should respect the developments that are going on in other fora, and likewise other fora should be very attentive and respectful of what we're discussing here. And so I think it would be useful to have some language in that regard that could work both ways. And finally, in 14.3, we are happy to support the the proposal by the European Union. We are thinking along the same lines, using the language from the convention, and in that regard, I think it might be even more useful to say not only under the authority and guidance, but also to include the part and be accountable to as it is in the convention. So that would read the multilateral mechanism, including the Global Fund, will operate under the authority and guidance of and be accountable to the Conference of the Parties. That's the language taken verbatim from the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. We have a few minutes before we close, so I'll just take the last few parties. 2 minutes maximum, if possible. If not, then I think it will be very, very few. So I'll have EU, then Canada.
I'll try to be very brief. I think that we are going towards sort of a good commonplace on paragraph 14, and I think that the language that Brazil just put forward could be a starting point for further discussion around that national measures should sort of be supportive to the operation of the multilateral mechanism, and that we actually need language on the avoidance of double requirements for benefit sharing. And I think that we would not see that as a giving up of national sovereignty. It is actually sort of being true to the spirit of 59 to enable the operation of the multilateral mechanism. On 14 bis, I think that we are sympathetic to the spirit of the Norwegian proposal. We're just not convinced that that could be a collective process. I can hardly see BB&J, WHO, WIPO, and all that coming together in one gigantic round of negotiations. I think each, and I go there with Chile, each process has its specificities. And when you look at what's happening in WHO and under BB&J, they all make clear references to the CBD process, which means that those processes are ready to engage with us if the CBD comes up with a reasonable approach in that regard. Therefore, I think that a general reference to sort of not only enhancing mutual supportiveness, but also, as we have said earlier in previous occasion, the adaptability to other access and benefit sharing instruments is important. I think people have said we need to be adaptable to what they would need. I think arrangements would be very good in that regard. I think that also we would sort of see, coming back to paragraph 14, we would need to express somewhere in the text that there is, of course, the right of parties to continue to putting in place national measures that require the sharing of benefits from DSI. That's national sovereignty. But I think that means that they would not be eligible for funding from the multilateral mechanism. They have a choice. And I think that is what I think we need to express somehow in these paragraphs in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. Canada.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Just like to add to para 13, we think it would be appropriate to include a specific reference to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples when referencing Indigenous peoples in this paragraph, so we'd like to add that. On paragraph 14, really good constructive discussions this afternoon so far. We support the UK's proposal for inserting bilateral there, so refrain from putting in place national bilateral measures, and we're interested by Brazil's proposal about adding language on that duplicates sharing of benefits. We take note of Argentina's concern about suspending national sovereignty, but I think the EU just made a good point about that as well. And I think we're going to get somewhere most constructively by thinking about how domestic regimes can make room for, in their national legislation, a point to the multilateral mechanism when we come to databases. Also on paragraph 14 bis, and I can't remember if someone's already said this, we'd like to add as another reason at the end of the sentence to avoid stacking of obligations. We're interested in Norway's proposal regarding a collective arrangement amongst those those international instruments and like the EU's suggestion of adaptability as well. And of course, we note Chile's points about those bodies being independent. On 14-ter, we're interested in the new suggestions based on convention language, although to note, we do consider that the GEF and the GBFF are under the authority and guidance of the COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada, for your comments. And lastly, we will have Malawi, and then we'll decide on the next steps because we seem to have run out of time. Malawi.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Malawi wants to comment on paragraph 14. We appreciate the thinking behind this recommendation, but perhaps to address the concerns that has been raised by others, the paragraph can be improved by focusing on encouraging parties to put in place national measures that align with the multilateral mechanism and that recognize the multilateral mechanism as the mechanism for sharing of benefits arising from the use of the DSI available in public databases. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. I know we still have a long list of parties, but we have unfortunately run out of time. Like I indicated, we were going to go as far as we could go, and we still have time to continue to deliberate on these paragraphs, noting that more countries have not yet spoken. So for now, we would love to release you for your break, and also bear in mind we have some side events going on that are also important to continue to inform us on how we move forward. So now I'll just hand over to my co-chair just to provide details on the next steps moving forward. So co-chair, over to you.
Much, Co-Chair. Thank you, everyone. Great discussion. Very good. We've covered a lot of ground. We'll continue tomorrow. So please do attend the side events, which will start shortly over the lunch break. A reminder, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, we have Contact Group 1, which is further developing the options within paragraph 2, including enclosure A and some associated paragraphs. That will take place in the Evo building, which is, I might not be pointing in the right direction actually, it's in a direction but it's very nearby. I think you walk down a hill, down a hill, so if you see a hill, go down. At 7:30 we will meet in the same place. We will have Contact Group 2, which will develop the options within paragraph 12, including enclosure D and some associated paragraphs. Tomorrow morning, we'll reconvene here at 10 a.m. for the Committee of the Whole. We will hear reports from the contact groups, and we might have a short discussion on what we hear from the contact groups, and then we will carry on our discussion where we got to just this second. Thank you very much, everyone. See you soon. You have to take your things. You can't come back.